Welcome to Citizen Spotlight. My name is Richard DeSauger. I've been asked to host this program today, and we have with us Alex James and Sam Merlin, and we're going to start actually by asking both of you maybe to tell a little bit about yourselves. We're going to get into your trip that you took to Cuba, but first of all, how long have you lived in Medfield? Where'd you go to school, and what do you do for work?
So I'm Alex, and I've lived in Medfield pretty much my whole life, but I graduated from MHS in 2010, and I work here at Medfield TV right now with Sam.
Yep. So as you said, I work here as well. I'm a graduate of MHS as well, and I recently moved out of town, but I had been a resident since I was in the, let's say, 7th grade, so that was about 6 years here in the high school and middle school.
Yeah, now both of you guys have done something most Americans have not been able to do, and that's go to Cuba. And as you probably know, in the late 1950s, there was a revolution in Cuba. The dictator Batista was overthrown. Fidel Castro took over. One of the first things he did was to nationalize the American businesses. We had a huge business presence that was in Cuba that didn't sit very well with President Eisenhower and the American public. Very shortly, an embargo was put on Cuba to try to punish Fidel Castro for that, and the Cold War going on that shifted Fidel Castro right over to the then Soviet Union side, and then suddenly Cuba was the enemy 90 miles off our coast, and we went through the Bay of Pigs crisis where our CIA actually tried to lead a takeover of having Cubans who had fled overthrow Fidel Castro, and then of course the Cuban Missile Crisis, where nuclear missiles were put on the island of Cuba, and we came to that crisis. So we've not been able to go to Cuba for more than 50 years now. So you have a great, just a great opportunity. So maybe I'll start by asking, why did you go to Cuba?
So Cuba was kind of Sam's original idea. It was his dream destination, and we would kind of always talk about at work, like these dream vacations that we wanted to take, and Sam's was Cuba, and he kind of sparked my interest in it.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know, I had a big interest, going through the Medfield school system. As you would know, they have a very strong history department, and I was very interested in kind of the whole Bay of Pigs and everything with Cuba and U.S. and Cuban relations. And also, I mean, the old cars and the old Havana aren't too bad to go see as well. But I was really interested in kind of how the embargo has affected Cuba and the changes that might come if it is lifted, with President Obama being over there and trying to make things or heal,
Now, did you guys go just as tourists, or were you sponsored by a group? Or?
So we went with an organization called Witness for Peace, and I knew we wanted to go to Cuba, so I just Googled, like, you have to go through a delegation with a registered people-to-people organization. So I just did a lot of research online, and I found Witness for Peace, and they kind of seemed the best organization out there, really professional. They have a history of going to a lot of different countries in Central and South America. So we went through them, and this is not the case anymore, but at the time that Sam and I were applying, you actually had to go through this registered people-to-people delegation. Now you can go on your own, not as a tourist, but you don't have to go through an organization. But at the time we were applying, we did have to do the organization.
Can you tell us a little, because I wasn't familiar with them, what are some of the goals and purposes of this Witness for Peace? So what do they do or stand for?
They're big into nonviolence.
Yeah,
they're like a grassroots organization that is working towards nonviolence and changing U.S. policies so that we can support economic development and lessening poverty in these countries. So they go to these countries that are not economically advanced right now and try to facilitate a relationship between the U.S. and these countries. And Cuba, obviously, there's the governments do not get along. So we went in to try to facilitate a relationship, basically.
Is there any other examples of other countries that have gone into it, and have they been in Cuba for a long time, or is it just because of the thaw now that they went in?
No, they've been in Cuba since for quite a while, yeah, but they also, I believe right now it's Mexico, Nicaragua, Honduras, and Colombia are other countries that they go into, and they've had some very positive effects in all of those countries. but Cuba is a very important place that they're in
So
right now.
you found it just by going online? Is that how you found out about it?
Yeah, basically just Googling. And we traveled with a group of about 20 other people. But a lot of the other people we traveled with had heard about the organization before and knew like the great work that they did. So Sam and I kind of learned about that once we went with them.
Now, the people you went with, were they generally your age? Were they older? Or what was the makeup of the group?
Many of them were actually older people. There was about maybe 5 of us young people there, but a lot of people in their 70s and older even. And
Oh, so you were the youngest in the group?
Yeah.
were you?
Yeah, Sam was
I
the
was the
youngest.
Oh, you were the youngest, okay. Well, why don't we talk a little bit about the trip itself?
Yeah.
What did you have to do to get prepared for it? You know, were there medical things such as certain shots you had to get, or what preparations did you have to go through to get into Cuba?
We didn't have to get any shots. There were no medical requirements to
Okay.
go over there. We knew Zika might have been a problem, so we definitely wore a lot of bug cream. But we had to get visas, and you can't just fly to Cuba. You have to go on a charter flight to go over there. But luckily, because we went through the organization, we didn't have to set that up. Our guide set that all up for us. But you do need a visa to get into Cuba.
So did you fly out of Logan?
We flew out of Logan
Yeah.
to Miami.
And then from Miami, we took the charter flight over to Cuba. But we had to arrange the flight from here to Miami ourselves. But once we were there, it was all handled by the organization.
Now, yo habla español? You guys speak Spanish? Were you?
French in school, so
You were
I was not
French.
very helpful in the speaking Spanish.
Now,
Yeah.
did everyone speak English, or did you have a hard time because you didn't have the Spanish?
We had an amazing translator, actually. Alberto was our translator, and he translated everything for us. We were very lucky to have him.
How about the average Cuban you saw? Could they speak English, or is it all Spanish?
For the most part, it was Spanish. There were a few bilingual people, but for the most part, we had our translator translate it all for us.
Yeah.
And do you speak Spanish?
Well, I did take Spanish in high school and middle school. I'm not sure how much I retained, but for like little, I don't know, interactions, it was
You can
good
understand
enough.
a little bit?
Yeah, like how to get around or like trying to buy something, but that's like the extent of it.
Now, when you arrived in Cuba, can you give us a little geography lesson of where you went within the island?
So we flew into Havana. We spent most of our time in Havana, but we did spend 3 or 4 days in Vinales, which is in western Cuba in the Pinar del Rio region. It was about a 3-hour bus ride to get there, and that was very much the country. So Havana is the city, the capital, but Vinales is just the beautiful countryside. So we did get to experience kind of both geography, which was cool.
How were the roads and the bus ride? How was the? Are they new buses? Old? Are the roads good condition? Or?
We were supposed to have a nice
Yeah.
bus, and then it ended up breaking the day before we left. So we took like a school bus, like basically what you would take to school, very rickety. And the roads, I would say, were bumpy.
They were pretty bumpy, but I mean, for the most part, I was very surprised at how well maintained it was. I mean, I live over in Millis now, and I found that some of the roads where I live are
Well, you
actually
take Dover
worse than
Road in
Cuba.
Mill. It probably looks like it's a third world country there. But,
Yeah.
I wish they would fix that. But so you get to Western Cuba, and then did you go around the island and then come back to Havana? Where did you go from there?
No, we basically just stayed in those 2 cities.
Okay.
Yeah.
So where did you actually stay? Were you in a youth hostel, hotels, family home? Where did you stay?
Well, we stayed at this center called the MLK Center, and I guess they have very good relations with Witness for Peace. We had a guide was actually from the MLK Center, and they're very much about, I don't know, the same kind of issues that Witness for Peace cares about, nonviolence and whatnot. And it was, I'd say it's like a hostel type living
Yeah.
environment, but they had all the accommodations for us, food and everything. It was actually pretty nice, I thought. So.
Running water, electricity, the whole bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was right in the neighborhood, which was really cool. I think a lot of delegations stay at these nice hotels, which is great, but then you're not integrating into the community. And this is a center that, it's the Martin Luther King Center, that the community members would use as well. So we were interacting with a lot of the locals, and we got to, it just felt very integrated into the community instead of like separating ourselves as tourists.
Now, did you have freedom of travel? Like at night, could you go out wherever you wanted, or is it just where they wanted to show you? And when you did go out, did you feel safe when you were out there? Was crime an issue and things like that?
I felt very safe. Cuba is known for being a very safe country. There are other places that Witness for Peace goes, and they said you can spend an entire day talking about safety, and that wasn't the case for Cuba. It was, we could travel freely at night. Obviously, travel is probably preferred in groups, but we walked around our neighborhood, and they said you really don't have to worry about violent crime.
So was there a large police presence, or is it just the nature of just the safe environment?
It's just really a safe environment, and even like they are saying that the police really don't have too much to do, so sometimes they'll be like engineers and just helping out the community and stuff. So, but really, it's not like you see like cars flying down with the sirens or anything. It's very peaceful. You know, we go out almost every night with a group of people, but at the same time, we still felt very safe.
And could you take pictures wherever you wanted to? There was no restrictions or anything?
Absolutely no restrictions, and I did not get the impression at all that they were just showing us certain areas. We had freedom to travel pretty much anywhere.
How were you treated once people found out you were an American? Was there a different way they would treat you, or could they identify right away and say, oh, here's this American? Did you stand out in the crowd? Or?
I didn't feel like we stood out too much, but we definitely, that was something I was worried about going in, because I know the relationship between the two countries is a little fragile, but no, treated, almost excited that we were Americans, and so excited to talk to us and learn about us, and we were so excited to learn from them, and the Cubans so want this relationship between the two countries to be better. So yeah, they really enjoyed talking to us, and we enjoyed talking to them.
What type of questions would they ask you when they came up to you?
They just wanted to know basically our impressions about what was going on between the two countries. I think they wanted to know if we kind of agreed with what had happened and wanted to know more about that.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah.
I didn't feel there were too many questions coming from their side to us. It was mostly just, I don't know, just interactions and just excitement about what could become of, you know, our two countries if relations were to improve.
Mm-hmm. And so welcoming for us into their country.
What did you find? 'Cause I mean, a lot you hear of the poor economic conditions, and many times in a communist country because of the nature of the economic system. But how did you find? Did it appear to be a lot of poverty there, or no poverty? Everyone seemed to be equal. Were there, you know, high end and poverty? What was the economic makeup that you saw as you traveled around?
Well, there were certainly a lot of areas of poverty, but the thing with Cuba is that their communities, they don't have like rich and poor communities. They kind of all integrate into communities together, and so you don't have that stigma, I guess, or that separation between the two. But there certainly is a good bit of poverty there, and a big cause of that would probably be the embargo, as we were talked a lot about with the people we met there.
So were they tying a lot of the economic poverty due to the fact that there was the economic embargo by the United States? Is that their feeling?
Yeah, that's strongly their feeling, that the embargo has kind of crushed the infrastructure of Cuba. And I mean, I don't blame them for really thinking that, and because it has really affected their lifestyle over there and what they have access to. So yeah, it's played a big role in how Cuba's really advanced over the years, or not advanced.
And we saw poverty, but just something that really stood out to me about Cuba too is they are so focused on family and relationships with people, and they treat their friends as family, and there's so much happiness in the country, even though they don't have a lot. They're so, like, these relationships that they have are so important. So it's just not a materialistic society at all. They're so grateful for what they have, which was amazing.
Now, were you mainly in urban areas? Did you get a chance to go out into the hinterland, the countryside at all?
Yep, so when we were in Vinales, we were in the countryside, and it was kind of the same thing.
Again, the people very happy, just be living with what they have, and I think that's something that we should really take in ourselves.
Yeah.
Be a bit less materialistic, less on our phones constantly. So
yeah. Did you see like the shopping malls or individual stores? Was it all kind of government run stores there?
It was, well, let's see. A lot of people ran businesses outside of their own homes, actually. There'd just be random, like, little shops as you walk down the street. and there really weren't any big malls or markets like you see here in the U.S.
It's funny, no. So a big reason we wanted to go to Cuba was we wanted to go there before the Starbucks opened, before the McDonald's opened. So yeah, no, none of those commercial stores, no advertising, no billboards anywhere, just no big shopping malls. It definitely felt like we were stepping back in time kind of before those things were big, which was really nice, actually.
Really
Right.
nice.
Well, of course, under a communist system, you don't have the competition, which would eliminate a lot of the need for advertising and things like that. Just a little bit on education. Did you get to go to any schools there or meet students, and what are their views? You know, do they go through high school like ours, and is it a college? The job, a little bit, what did you see with education there?
Yeah, so we did get to go to a few schools, but just the big thing about education that we saw is just how much they value the arts there, which I know is something that American schools are almost thinking about getting rid of or stepping back a little, not funding as much. Arts are so important to Cubans. We saw all these children performing dancing and singing, different performances. So that was just something that I really took away, the importance of the arts in the Cuban school system.
Yeah, it felt like everyone there could dance or sing, and
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I was just there. You know, we
We
took a
tried.
dance lesson. Didn't go too well for us, or at least for me, I know.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, no, the education system there, I feel, is very strong actually, and a lot of kids actually go off and go on to college and kind of travel outside of Cuba to go pursue even bigger and greater things.
Mm-hmm.
Did you actually get inside the classroom? Are they small classes, large, or did you see anything? Is it modern? Is it equipment? Does it have like computers and things like that we would have here?
Yeah, we went to a small kind of arts classroom, and it was kind of more in the country, and no, it was not very modern, and they definitely did not have computers. Even when you went to buy things at a store, they wouldn't have like a cash register. They would be using like an old-fashioned calculator. So they're definitely lacking in technology because of the embargo and not being able to get those things into the country.
Well, did you have internet access at all when you were there?
We spent the entire 10 days with no internet access.
Oh,
we
how did
couldn't
you
use our
survive?
I know, right? It was tough. Yeah, even the Cuban people, I actually wanted one of my guides to give us the weather every morning because I wanted to know, should I be wearing a rain jacket? What should I be wearing? And she told us that she couldn't even access the weather information in the morning because she couldn't get on the internet. So we witnessed this really interesting phenomenon at night of people gathering in these certain locations in Havana where they could finally take a break from their jobs, take a break from their life to get on the internet.
Wow.
So it's not like constant internet access like we're so used to and really take for granted here.
So there's not the social mobility that you would see here, the
No.
young people and everything with the phones.
No.
How about medical care? Did you get to go to either a hospital or medical center? Anything about the medical care, the quality that you saw there?
We visited many different medical areas around there. We actually visited a pretty big campus that was dedicated to teaching people about medical system and just training doctors to go out and around the world. And it was very, also, there was also smaller areas like a nurse practitioner that you'd go to would be kind of like in this house sort of thing. Or they'd go out to different people like on call and whatnot. But it was still, I found, a very good system, and someone in our group actually had to take a trip down, and she was very impressed with it.
Yeah.
So.
They are lacking certain medications that they can't get into the country, though, because of the embargo. I remember one of the family doctors said one of the toughest things for her was seeing people with cancer who were dying and couldn't get that medication that they really needed. So they're definitely, they do have a good medical system, but there's still things that are happening because of the embargo that's been bad for them.
Because they're not able to get some of the equipment and the drugs and medication.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
So the U.S. has an embargo against Cuba, but also the deal with that embargo is other countries can't trade with Cuba either, or they have to sever their relationships with the United States. So these countries have to pick, do they want to have a relationship with the U.S. or Cuba? And most of them choose the U.S. because of what a big superpower it is. So that was just something interesting.
Well, let me just stay with that for a second then. President Obama has actually gone over to Cuba. I'm not sure whether it was just after or just before you guys went, but and he's been trying to push for a thaw in relations with Cuba. The embargo itself, of course, is something that Congress would have to do away with. And right now, plus before the election, I don't think you're going to see any action on that. But was there any talk about either President Obama or Congress or the embargo, any political discussions that you ran into?
Yeah, we had a very interesting discussion with one of our Cuban leaders, and she was talking about President Obama's visit. And just something interesting that she said about that was just how planned out the entire visit was. And Obama refused to talk about Guantanamo Bay when he was there. And she was saying the two most important issues for Cuba is ending the embargo and returning Guantanamo Bay to their country. And how could he not talk about such a huge issue? And I know another big part of his talk was kind of forgetting the past, and let's forget about that, let's move forward in this new relationship. And she was saying, how can we as Cubans forget the past when so much of what happened is affecting our lives, is affecting our children? Our children have to leave the country to get a job because there's no economic situation that's good in Cuba. So she was very disappointed that he was so wanting to forget the past when we do need to talk about the past and, you know, fix that relationship.
So the trip for the people you talked to, that it was not this upbeat, it was more of a negative view that you ran across?
Well, I think that it was just certain parts that people did not agree with, kind of how he presented himself. But overall, I think it was very positive feedback from them, because they're very wanting relations to be well again between the U.S. and Cuba, and for just the embargo to be ended so that they can start building up again.
Yeah, I think they're appreciative that Obama was there. It's just we have to talk about the things he didn't do as well. But overall, it was great that he made that trip to the country. And I know there was, it was good that he was there.
Do they give you an impression of how they feel their life would be different if the embargo was lifted?
Yeah, very much. Everyone we almost asked everyone we saw, how do you think you'd be affected if the embargo ended? And they all said that it can only be good things, and that things can only get better, businesses can only flourish. And, you know, I mean, we're all scared about Cuba changing with like McDonald's coming in or Starbucks. But I think, as our guide said, she said, not really scared that much will change. It's just that things can only get better. But she thinks that the Cuban people really hold on to their values and their culture, and that's what's really important.
Do they think that the communist government will remain, or do they feel that eventually that too will be overthrown or change? Or do they talk about that at all?
We talked about that a little. I think they had an idea of who was going to be the successor to Raul, who's in there right now, Raul Castro. It was funny because they definitely thought Fidel was a much better leader, and there was just a little discrepancy over that. But we didn't go into too much detail on that, to be honest. So it'll be interesting for everyone to see.
We just have a couple of minutes, but I had to ask you this one. How was the food?
Sam loved
I
the
love the food there.
Really?
Rice and beans.
Give me an example of what your type of food that you were eating there.
Well, we had a lot of rice and beans. That's the big one. We had lots of raw vegetables, actually. That would be our salad. It would be just, what is it? Like
tomatoes, cucumbers, and cabbage.
Yeah, and what else was there? A lot of
fruit, a lot of
fruit,
papaya, coconut, pineapple, a lot of really delicious fruits. Yeah, they were big, and a lot of desserts were coconut. It was good. And
plenty of just numbers of foods available and things like that.
Yeah, pork, chicken, beef. Yeah, a little bit of everything.
Let me ask you this: were there misconceptions when you talked to some of the people you met in Cuba? Were there misconceptions that the Cuban people had about Americans, and maybe the flip side of that, having been there? Can you correct us maybe? Are there misconceptions we have about Cuba?
I think there certainly are a lot of misconceptions that we have about Cuba. Like going into it, I was, as we were saying, kind of scared of how the Cuban people would kind of take us in, and that's totally nothing we should have been worried about, because they're very welcoming, very almost like loving, as if they're taking in their own family members. It's like we're long lost friends or something. So.
Yeah, a lot of people I talked to when I came home too were saying how could you go to a country that doesn't want Americans there, that they're blocking us from entering their country? I was like, no, it's actually the opposite. It's America doesn't want us to travel to Cuba. They would love Americans there. It's not the case at all. It's America that doesn't want us going to Cuba. So that was just a funny little misconception that people had.
And also I find that Americans think that it's a very oppressive government over there, that there's no freedom of speech, that no one can speak their mind, but I felt it was very much the opposite. I was very surprised at how much the arts and music and that whole culture really was part of their everyday life. And they're just very, they're open to anything. They can say anything they want, really.
You can criticize the government.
Although we hear a lot about just the human rights and many people jailed and dissidents and things. Any discussion come up at all with that? Anything with the human rights issues you heard?
We didn't go too in depth with that, but we did ask our Cuban leader, and she was just wanted to say that she felt like she could criticize the government openly, and nothing would come of that. Yeah, but I'm sure there are different situations. Yeah.
Just one last thing, because we're going to wrap this up. The one thing, if I ever went to Cuba, the one thing I always would like to see, and you see in the specials, is it true you see all these 1950s Chevys and Fords all over the place? Is it?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, everywhere. Yeah. I thought it was might be in Havana too, but we went out into the country. It's really what the people use and for getting everywhere.
Like the time before the embargo, it's like frozen in time.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. That's exactly how you feel. It's cool.
Let me ask you this: what would you like the American people to know as a result of your trip?
I just want everyone to know how welcomed I felt into the country. It was such a personal trip for me. So many of the people we visited were actually personal friends of our guides. So it felt like I was visiting family, and then they were introducing me to their family. And just absolutely no hate, because we were Americans. We went to visit this artist, and he had this little joke. He was saying, what do Cubans most love about America? And he said, we love American cars and we love everything else. They really do love America. And they were also saying, we're neighbors. We're countries that are right next door to each other. How can we not get along? Yeah. So it's just a relationship that we really need to work towards. And it's going to benefit the Cuban people a lot.
How about you, Sam? Something different of what you would want American people to know as a result of your trip?
It's hard to take after that. I feel
good.
like the community was very strong. And that's what I felt was very important, but also kind of going off of that, as she mentioned before, the materialisticness, I guess that I think we should take after kind of the Cuban culture and maybe try to appreciate what we have a bit more, because they certainly live with the bare minimums, but they make do, and they're very happy and very pleasant, and that's just a strong value I think I came back with from there. And also just that the embargo should be something we work towards ending and building relations rather than keep pushing away and keep making things worse as time goes on, because I think it would be very helpful for the Cubans and for the U.S. if we just end these bad relations that we've had.
Geez, what an exciting trip. What a great opportunity you had. I know whenever you go on a trip, there's always something when you come back is like the best story. What's the best story you can tell of your trip going to Cuba? An adventure or something that happened that...
Yeah, well, we took a really cool trip out in Vinales where we walked, we hiked to a cave up in the mountains by this guy who was like a rock climber. And it wasn't on the itinerary, it wasn't planned at all. We just had this free time and we wanted to do something cool. So we got to walk all through this beautiful Cuban countryside, and we made it to this cave. And then we were kind of late coming back because we had another activity that we had to get quickly back for. So we ended up just cutting through all these farmlands and through people's backyards, trying to get back to where we were staying. So I felt like we were really in the community at that point and outside of the city, kind of more in the country. And that just was a very authentic experience for me. So that was really cool.
Wow.
Yeah.
What's your best story?
She stole it.
Oh, no, sorry.
I guess another one would be just driving in the old cars. And also, the first night we were there, we went out actually, and we had to grab a taxi back, and all their taxis almost are from kind of old cars that's been kind of tinkered with.
Yeah.
And so we got in the shell of a 1950s Pontiac, where they replaced the manual to an automatic. And also the funny thing was, I looked over, I saw the steering wheel, it had a Kia logo on it.
Oh,
So
really?
they had, it's just all this mixed mash of things.
Yeah.
But definitely going to the countryside was my favorite part. Took a
Yeah.
lot of pictures, and it was just absolutely gorgeous.
Just a great trip overall.
Yeah.
So, a final question, would you go back again?
Certainly. I
Yes.
would go back in an instant.
Definitely. Next
Okay.
year we'll be back.
Are you
I don't
planning?
know, hopefully.
Okay, we'll wrap it up. We have a nice chance to talk with Sam and Alex, and I'm Richard DeSauger, and good evening.
There you go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
The preceding was a production of Medfield TV, Community Show.